So the school kids would be wearing like, oh, here's my Flintstones knapsack or my, Scooby-Doo knapsack. But here comes the Asian kid, right? Yeah, this is my Vegeta Super Saiyan backpack. And everyone's looking at him going, holy crap, what the hell is that? At this time, Dragon Ball was just starting to come out in Japan.
Dragon Ball was literally one of those things where when I could start remembering, I just knew Goku was a thing and I knew Dragon Ball was a thing.
At the time, I didn't know what it was. Some kid with a tail, okay, doing stuff, okay, whatever. I subscribed to 3 different Japanese magazines, and Dragon Ball keeps appearing.
I think of that as like almost the most purest representation of how quirky, sort of like the moment you see it, you know it's Toriyama. What do you think is the thing that makes it Toriyama?
He played on the university varsity team for hockey, which is kind of strange for a person coming from Japan, right? Even to make it even stranger, of all the positions he played goalie.
What? 96-ish is when you would have got Dragon Ball Z. How big was Dragon Ball compared to Pokemon back then?
Whoever was on doing the stuff for Pokemon did it 100% right, and whoever was doing Dragon Ball dropped the ball and screwed it up. And I'll tell you why.
We've been talking about Toriyama throughout this episode here and there. How important and influential do you think Toriyama really was? Like, how would you explain to someone who, let's say, for example, a complete normie, has no idea who Toriyama is, has no idea about Dragon Ball or anything to do with anime at all? How would you explain how important this man is in history? How does it feel knowing that Toriyama is no longer here?
It's a little mixed of things. It basically it's a shot in reality that we're all not getting any younger.
God, yes, definitely not getting younger. No,
and it just pushes and inspires me to continue working on and doing all the things that you've ever wanted to do, and get them done, get them out of that dream phase, that I'll get to it phase, and actually start doing it. And that's why you may notice me doing a lot of little different things, a lot of things I had on my mind, little projects here and there that I always wanted to do, I like to do, wanted to know how to do. It really just kind of gets you to think that we don't have actually all that much time on the earth, and don't let that stop you from doing the things that you've always wanted to do and always reach for that dream that you've always wanted to do.
Yeah, man, I know what you mean. It's kind of a strange one in that sense, because none of us are related to Toriyama, but his loss is so monumental. I guess you would say it's essentially, I've seen someone say, it's like losing the Stan Lee of manga, quite literally. Like this is not the same world anymore, and now we've got to figure out what we're going to do with our remaining time in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very influential figure because he's done a lot of things. And whenever we lose someone with that level of creativity and that sort of experience, you always wonder who's going to be the next person that will rise up to replace him, to fill those shoes, follow in his footsteps. And that is going to be a very daunting task.
Yeah, definitely daunting. Oh, goodness me, I didn't think we'd get this philosophical straight off the bat, but there we go. So, what was your first experience of anything by Toriyama? Like, what was your first Toriyama work, and what was the whole story behind that?
I experienced his work. Like I said, I got into Japanese animation when I first moved down to Vancouver back in 1986. At this time, Dragon Ball was just starting to come out in Japan, and anyone who's really lived in the Pac Rim, we have access to a lot of things like such as Japanese programming a long time ahead of the norm in other countries, right? So people who lived in, let's say, Vancouver, Seattle, Los Angeles, and Hong Kong, Taiwan, and maybe even things like Korea and that kind of stuff, always have more access to Japanese animation stuff than everyone else in the Western world. So my first experiences when I first came down to Vancouver. I got started, getting interested in this anime kind of stuff from basically some of the people that I attended the university with. And they suggested, you should go to these Japanese rental stores, located in various places in Vancouver here. One particular one comes to mind was this. It's located in what they refer to as Little Japan, just a small sort of half a block full of various retailers, mom and pop shops from Japanese people, right? This grocery store is your usual typical place that sells, some Japanese candy and and some various different sort of special made in Japan type of products, as well as a place for frozen and fresh cut meat and that kind of stuff. But the odd thing that they had was they had these video cassettes lined up on top of all their freezers and their coolers. And what they did is they had family that lived in Japan, and they just literally recorded on these tapes everything that they played on a particular TV station from, let's say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon to like 9 o'clock at night or something like that, right? Anything that was on TV, they'd record everything, commercials and everything. And then what they'd do is they'd pack them up into a box, every week or month, and then they'd send them to their relatives here in Vancouver. And then they'd put them on the shelf and they'd rent them for like $2 a week or something like that, right? And so I found these sort of randomly labeled tapes, and some of them were like very, very, all they would have was like a date on them. They didn't write down even what the contents were. It's a date.
It's a lucky dip, basically, in terms of what you get.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I'm just interested in what's on NHK on like, February 21st or something, right? But I went there and I rented a bunch of things because I spotted on a bunch of tapes some anime ones where it was like Zeta Gundam and regular Gundam and City Hunter and this thing called Dragonball. It was all sort of all mixed up on tape because obviously they're just recording from a certain time to a certain time, right? So it was whatever they were playing got recorded on the tape. So I started renting this stuff out, and sure, I got really interested in more and more of this kind of anime and that kind of stuff. I thought Dragon Ball was kind of interesting because it was, it was a playful sort of anime. Anime. It seemed to be continuing on. At the time, I was probably more interested in the Gundam episodes that they had. That was where I first was exposed to the Orange Road episodes that I later did as my first fan sub. And it was here where I kind of really got interested in this thing called Dragon Ball. Now I do have another follow-up story, which also happens at the same time. While I was at university, I met a person named Asa. He had a Japanese exchange student with him at that time. He was very special in the sense that he played on the university varsity team for hockey, which is kind of strange for a person coming from Japan, right?
Yeah.
Even to make it even stranger, of all the positions he played goalie.
What? Okay? Really?
Yeah. If you're getting into hockey, that's the most expensive and probably the hardest position to play, because you're just getting pucks like slapped at you, and you have to be extremely flexible and take a lot of punishment. But that's the position he played, right?
Okay.
Anyway, so what he did, his name was Yoshi. What he did and made an agreement for was Asa here would record our Vancouver Canucks hockey team, NHL hockey team games for him, and send them to Japan, because in Japan there's no way to get those games because there is no such thing as satellite or any of that kind of stuff to get it there, right? So
yeah.
What he would do is he'd record the games and send it to him, and in exchange, Yoshi would record all this anime and send it back to us.
Oh wow! Okay, literally like an old school VHS exchange, but instead
exactly.
Instead of TV
so that
programs,
way he gets to see his games and that kind of stuff, and see how the team's kind of progressing, right? Because at the same time, there's no way to get news of how the team is going over there, right? There's no radio stations they'll broadcast out there. The TV stations won't make it out there, right? Unless you get a newspaper from North America here sent to Japan, he would probably never know what all the scores were. This was his way of keeping up with the team and watching some good hockey, right? And so in exchange, he would record City Hunter, Dragon Ball. I think he was doing Zeta Gundam at that time, and a whole bunch of other various different sort of animes that were really the in thing, because we'd use our New Type magazine or Animedia magazine to find out what was on TV. And then whatever interested us, we'd say, hey, why don't you throw such and such onto that tape? Hey, this show is called Dragon Art. Seems pretty interesting. Let's throw that onto the tape, whatever, right? So that's how we got Dragon Ball episodes literally a couple of months after they actually got aired in Japan. Sure, they're straight in Japanese, but we were able to follow the story pretty well much the same way the magazines came out. So when the Japanese magazine came out, and it said, hey, in February of whatever, episode 67 of Dragon Ball came out, we could go to the tape and pull up that same episode just a few months later. And so I think a lot of people who lived in the Pac Rim, because the same sort of situation happens in Hong Kong and Taiwan, where I know later on, not with Dragon Ball, but with Dragon Ball Z, they started releasing VCDs and stuff with Dragon Ball and Dr. Slump and that kind of stuff with Chinese subtitles. And they were relatively cheap. I remember going down to Chinatown and seeing box sets and CD sets, VCD sets of them, available to buy. And this was long, long before any English dub or English sub came out here in North America. So Dragon Ball, it actually came out in 87, okay, or 86. I was doing these tape trades with ASA back as early as 87, extremely early. And of course, the US releases for Dragon Ball didn't come out until 95.
You kind of remind me when you're telling me about the years of, say, when this stuff would have happened. It's like, I remember looking up for myself, when did Dragon Ball Z come out in the UK? I'm pretty sure it came out later than the US seems to claim it had. I was thought, how much later? So basically in the UK, we got it 4 years later in 2000. I'm going, wait, what the hell? We had to wait that long? Yeah,
that wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, that would not surprise me. It said, what always happened, and that's why Fansubbers did really well back in the day, is that there's always a really huge lag time between the time it actually comes out in Japan to the time a English subtitle / dub version comes out here in North America. Something like Dragon Ball, it was a 9-year period between the time it came out and the time that we could consume it in English here in North America. Whereas some shows, Fansubbers, like myself, were able to get on it right away, get it fan subbed within a couple, within the same month sometimes, and then be able to have that available for people several years before a commercial company would pick it up here in the US.
So speaking of which, then, you and I, we're both Western-born Asians.
Yes.
And I'm kind of wondering what your sort of experience of that is when it comes to, say, Dragon Ball, then, in that case, whether it be, say, the original Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z that came out later on. What was your sort of experience of that? Because for me, in the UK, I remember Dragon Ball as this thing that was kind of in my household, in the sense that if you ask me what my first anime was, in the most weeaboo-like fashion in the world I could possibly describe, which is not meant to be, but it just unfortunately is, I wouldn't be able to tell you what my first anime is, because it might be Dragon Ball Z, it might be Dragon Ball, it might be Gundam, it might be actually be Orange Road as well, or Macross. It might be any one of these things, because my parents, they came from Hong Kong, and despite living in, say, England, where I am, they had access to essentially Cantonese dubbed VHS tapes. So we had access to, in this case, when it comes to Dragon Ball, I had a very interesting experience with Dragon Ball, which was that my experience of it was purely through the films. So I think there's 16 films or something like that, at least by now. I can't remember what their proper amount is since they added it with Dragon Ball Super and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. But essentially, my experience of Dragon Ball is a bit very different to most people who got exposed to it later on through, say, the Funimation dub, which is that for me, Goku was just a thing in my life. I knew of him, but his adventures was basically condensed into just a 1 hour, 2 hour film, basically. There was no sort of filler episodes. There was no drag. There was no sort of this world will definitely explode in 5 minutes and 20 episodes go by and the world is still intact and no one's died yet. That's been my sort of experience of it. And then it's really strange for me to see Western kids I grew up alongside with and went to school with in the year 2000, when we would have got it in the UK, absolutely lose their mind over Dragon Ball Z, go, oh my God, it's so amazing, and all that sort of stuff. And they're amazed that I seem to not only know about Dragon Ball Z, but I seem to have seen and experienced certain things about Dragon Ball Z that they had no idea about. It's going, wait, his hair turns yellow and all that sort of stuff. What? How does that work? And all that sort of crazy stuff. What's your experience of Dragon Ball pre-licensing and post-licensing?
Well, Dragon Ball for me, and especially any of us fob-like Asians, whatever, we were always ahead of the curve, because as you say, because of Hong Kong, Taiwan, we had access to these videos and the concept of Dragon Ball, as well as all the merchandise that came out from Hong Kong and that kind of stuff for Dragon Ball, way ahead of the Western side, right? And so, again, because of our parents and because of when we go shopping and that kind of stuff, we see this stuff all the time, you know. There's a couple of products and that kind of stuff that I always remember when I go to Chinatown and always have the experience of. We would go there and we would see all these stalls and shops selling all these, you know, strange goodies and that kind of stuff, bags or whatever, cards and whatnot. But they always had things that the Western kids didn't have, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So things like Dr. Slump, Dragon Quest, and Dragon Ball, we had all that stuff in Chinatown. Even though the games weren't released here in the US, and you know, Dr. Slump wasn't released here in the US, and Dragon Ball was just starting on the air, that wasn't going to get here in the US for another, you know, 9 years, but still the merchandise was already there. And we thought it was really cool, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We knew what it was, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens is, we would pick this stuff up, and it would look way more awesome than the crap that they had over here, right? So the school kids would be wearing like, oh, here's my, you know, Flintstones knapsack or my, you know, Scooby-Doo knapsack, right? And here the, you know, the Asian kid shows up with, yeah, this is my, you know, Vegeta, you know, Super Saiyan backpack, and everyone's looking at him going, holy crap, what the hell is that? You know, because it's gonna be all like sparkly and way better printed than like a Scooby-Doo just sort of, you know, inked onto a knapsack, right? It's
What's
like,
this muscular man that I see on this backpack?
Exactly, and then everyone's going, what the hell is that? And it's like, that's way cool, right? The other thing that always you know always happened was that you go to school or whatever, and people bring in like pencil cases, right? And so you go to like Staples, and a pencil case is like a stupid steel box that holds like 3 pencils and maybe your eraser or whatever, right? But here comes the Asian kid, right? Here's my Dragon Ball Z, you know, pencil case, right? It opens up 2 different ways. It's got you press a button and a pencil sharpener still clicks out the side, and it's got these legs that fold out, and you can put your book and holds up on it, and all the kids thought, wow, that is so cool. Where did you get that? Like, what the hell is that, right?
Dude, you are triggering so many memories in me. I had
right?
all of that.
Exactly. And then all the Western kids are going, like, we get this stupid little metal box, and you get like a Dragon Ball, you know, pencil case. I mean, like, what the hell? Like, you know, and again, they don't know what it is, but it looks cool. And all the Asian kids got this stuff, and like, they were like the cool kids, right?
Exactly. This was what made us cool in our day before the internet made us cool.
Yes, exactly. And I'll give you one more other example. Remember, there used to be a game called Pogs, milk caps, right? It became you know, popular in the sort of 91, 92, and kind of died out around 95.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just before, you know, Dragon Ball came out, right?
Yeah. Dragon Ball killed off Pogs. Okay.
Surprisingly, right? But yeah, so basically, the concept is these little pieces of cardboard circles, right, with a picture on it, right? And yeah, sure, you'd have your pictures of Mickey Mouse and Scooby-Doo and, you know, some Superman, Batman, whatever, and you basically you put them into stacks, right? And you use these little kind of plastic discs, which refer to as slammers, and you slam them onto the stack. And whichever ones you can knock off the stack, you get to keep, or you win them. That's the concept, right? So everyone's got these lame ones, which are like, usually they're superheroes, Walt Disney characters and that kind of stuff, right? But all the Asian kids would show up with these shiny, sparkly Dragon Ball ones, or, you know, Dragon Quest ones, right? And their slammers would be like, you know, sequenced and have little like shiny bits and reflective bits on it, so that, you know, when you turn it, it shows a different picture and all this other stuff. So all the Asian kids are going, yeah, okay, I'll play with this one, right? And of course, all the kids are going, where'd you get that from? Like, you know, hey, that's so cool, and like, you know.
Oh man, dude, we were so cool back then. We were so cool.
Yeah, like, exactly. You know, so the Asian kids had it like so good back then, right? Because
Gen Z kids have no idea about this. No idea.
Yeah, exactly. I said, yeah, because as I said, they were ahead of the curve, and they knew where to get all the really cool stuff, right? And that's exactly what happened. They had all the really good merchandise and that kind of stuff, and it was all because of these franchises like Dragon Ball. It really helped push that forward. So I think pre-commercialization, one of the big things that the Asians had was, again, their accessibility to that Dragon Ball franchise through the Pac Rim, right? That's their advantage over the rest of the people in the West. And that's why they were able to get not only, you know, the anime, even though they may not 100% understand it because it was maybe translated from Cantonese or whatever. But they were able to get access to all the cool stuff that came with marketing of Dragon Ball.
You know what I find really funny about all of this, now that you mention it, we had all the cool stuff when it comes to, I guess, Dragon Ball merch. But the thing which I don't think we had back then that would be considered cool would be, say, I guess the games back then. Like, back then it was only 16-bit at best. You might get 8-bit here and there. I don't know if there was an 8-bit Dragon Ball game. I'm pretty sure there must have been, considering
no. That was not an issue.
Was it not an issue? No?
Not an issue.
Not an issue? Oh.
Not an issue. As you know, Hong Kong, at the time, was the #1 bootleg capital of the world. Okay? If you had something that you wanted something cheap, you go to Hong Kong/Taiwan. That was where you went to go get stuff. So when they released those games for the Super Nintendo, and i.e. Dragon Quest, for example, right? Probably one of the biggest RPGs in that time. You can count on the Asians to figure out how to get around the region locking, get around the fact that you had to have a Japanese Famicom in order to play these type of games, right? So out came the Game Doctors.
Oh yes, I remember this.
Right?
Yes,
I remember paying $800 to buy one of those things from Taiwan, and that thing allows you to basically play any game that comes out from Japan with no restrictions to what kind of system you got it running on. And it literally allowed you to play those games without the need of actually having the physical cartridge in front of you. And again, it was up to the Asians to figure that out. And so, we were already playing Dragon Quest and the early Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3 and that kind of stuff. I'm sure we played a little bit of the Dragon Ball games and that kind of stuff. But I don't think a lot of the fighting games and that kind of stuff for Dragon Ball at that time was as refined as it is later on when the PlayStation came out.
Yeah, definitely.
I think at that time, people were still more interested in things like Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat, that kind of thing was more the big deal in terms of fighting engines. I mean, that was sort of like, the gold standard for fighting games at that time, right?
Yeah.
And Dragon Ball wasn't quite there yet in their Super Nintendo line of fighting games.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, if anything, that's what I personally feel about the Dragon Ball games in general, which is like the heyday of Dragon Ball games never really appeared until the 3D generation came around. I mean, I remember, say, I don't know what they called it for you guys in, like, say, North America. It probably might have been called the same thing. I say this because sometimes they rename titles for the UK slightly differently. So, for example, Star Fox 64 was called Lilac Wars for us for some reason. I don't know why, but they decided to call it that, and it's always confused me. Like, why is this? Why is everyone else calling it Star Fox 64? And when I know it's Lilac Wars, but
the same thing. The Mike Tyson, M Tyson, and M Bison, and Vega, and that big huge mix up in Street Fighter is all Western culture screwing around with the game.
Exactly. But Dragon Ball Z Budokai, that video game series, that's what they called it for you guys, I think, is it as well?
Yeah,
Budokai.
Right.
Yeah, like Budokai, I remember, like, some of my friends at school, oh my god, they were completely like losing it over that. They were going, oh my god, this is like the most amazing thing in the world. And bear in mind, for some of these guys as well, because they didn't necessarily grow up with Dragon Ball like us. I mean, don't get me wrong, we were still huge Dragon Ball fans, but like it didn't maybe hit us in the same way, in the sense of, like, for them it's literally like the newest thing they've ever experienced in their life. It was pure liquid poison and addictive meth for them, if you think of it that way, in that sense. So you see them buzzing around and go, this is the most amazing game in the world, and they stay up late and way past their bedtime to try and play it secretly without their parents catching them and all that sort of stuff. But when I think about it, I go like, well, I don't blame them, to be honest, because when I remember like sitting down actually playing Budokai with one of my friends, and I go, yeah, actually, this is really good. Actually, it's way better than whatever 16-bit stuff I would have had. When it came to Dragon Ball games, they were very limited back then. You had like essentially RPG style Dragon Ball games, which I had no idea how to properly play because I didn't understand any of the Japanese text. There's also like other games which were a bit more, say, I guess 2D fighter, Street Fighter stuff. I don't know, I can't remember what they were called, but they were pretty good. But again, it was still, it's like nothing beats that feeling of like full on sort of 3D in the sense of what you saw in something like, say, Budokai with like modern, I won't say modern, but back then very good high quality 3D graphics.
I think the problem is again, this is totally situational based on where you live, right, and the availability of what your stuff is, right. Like, So when you come up and get a game from, let's say in this case, like a Electronic Boutique or something like that, and there's very few of them in your area, right? And you come across a game like Dragon Ball, the fighting game, and because you're interested in Dragon Ball, you grab it, and then you think it's all awesome and great and that kind of stuff. And you contrast that to someone like myself, where I ran a video store, which did not only video rentals but also video games, right? We were always on the cutting edge of the most modern video games that just came out, right? And so whoever came in, always had access and always knew about the best, the latest, and the greatest. So if you compare what we had and what was coming out against something like a Dragon Ball and that kind of stuff, Dragon Ball, that sort of entire fighting game franchise and that kind of stuff, always fell behind what the market had available. So sure, when the original Dragon Ball fighting games came out, it was good as a Dragon Ball game. Same thing with the Sailor Moon games. They were good as a Sailor Moon game, but everyone always compared it to, in terms of a fighting game, Street Fighter 2, Turbo, or 3, or Mortal Kombat 1 and 2, Dead or Alive. All these other games sort of come in that have better features, they're 3D and all that kind of stuff. They all were better fighting games in general, in terms of the fighting engine. And so people tend to gravitate more to those, and they played those more, even though they maybe weren't franchises that they were really paying attention to. And I think that's one of the things that Dragon Ball as a game franchise never could catch up with.
Yeah. It's I go to myself, God damn, I'm so envious of some of these kids playing Dragon Ball games now. It's like, damn it, where was this when I was younger? It's like I'll trade my pencil cases gladly for this. Anyway, so 96-ish is when you would have got Dragon Ball Z. Around then, Pokemon would have been out for about a year now by that point, the Pokemon anime. Mm-hmm. So, how big was Dragon Ball compared to Pokemon back then?
Dragon Ball, it's a little strange, okay? And I'll word it this way. I think Dragon Ball had a certain type of appeal, and Pokemon had a certain type of appeal, maybe for a slightly younger audience, okay? But the difference is, when it came to marketing of Dragon Ball against Pokemon, whoever was on doing the stuff for Pokemon did it 100% right, and whoever was doing Dragon Ball dropped the ball and screwed it up. Okay?
Okay.
And I'll say this, and I'll tell you why. You think about how Dragon Ball and Pokemon came in roughly about the same time, like at least in terms of an American release. Just one being a lot older than the other, right? Dragon Ball, got itself on TV, and the same with Pokemon and that kind of stuff. But the difference is, Pokemon got its marketing done right away. Okay, if you can get McDonald's putting Pokemon cards in Happy Meals and having people flood to them just to buy freaking Happy Meals, they're doing something right, right? I mean, you've heard of those stories of people in Hong Kong going and buying Happy Meals for Hello Kitty toys, just keeping the toy and then dropping the Happy Meal to the homeless people outside the McDonald's.
Oh wow, okay, I didn't know about that one.
They'd go and buy like 10 Happy Meals, right? Just so they can get the entire set of Hello Kitties, right? But they don't know what to do with all the rest of all the meals, right? Because they don't care about the meals, right? They just want the set of Hello Kitties so that they can stick them on the dash of their car or something, right? And so what they did, they just go back on the street and say, hey, here you go. You want a Happy Meal? Here you go. That was fairly happy with things like Hello Kitty. The release of some of the special Pokemon toys, like the Pikachu that you crank on its tail, it lights up inside and that kind of stuff. But that's the thing. The guy who did marketing for Pokemon got it right? He got everyone to go on that, plushies, get the stuff into the Walmart. Let's start making all these different games for all these different platforms. Let's get some of the big names, McDonald's and that kind of stuff. Let's get them into the game. Can we say the same with Dragon Ball? They didn't. Right?
Oh my goodness, no, I don't think you would. No, I mean, I can
exactly.
just imagine
that didn't happen, right? Even to this date, Pokemon is still a huge draw for McDonald's. Anytime they have Pokemon cards inside their Happy Meals, people are just coming in buying tons and tons of Happy Meals. Even if they don't normally eat a Happy Meal or don't have kids, they'll buy Happy Meals.
what kind of Happy Meals did you guys have outside the UK, man? I didn't have any of this. It's like Pokemon cards and Happy Meals. What is this fantasy you're speaking of? I didn't get that at all.
Okay, well, we'll just say the concept of a Happy Meal is basically it's a kid-sized meal. So you get like burger or
Yeah, oh no,
like a mini burger.
I know what a Happy Meal is. I know what a
fries
Happy
and
Meal
that kind of
is.
stuff. But the thing is that the big pull was the Happy Meal always came with a toy.
I know what a Happy Meal is. I just didn't get Pokemon cards in my Happy Meals. It's like,
well, yeah, your marketing guys aren't doing the job, man. I tell you.
I'm starting to think that, I think the UK was a lot worse than I thought in terms of the experience. It's like, I mean, I think I mentioned this last time. Like, the UK always seems to get shafted when it comes to getting any kind of merchandise or any kind of anime thing at all. Like, we always had the worst selection. I don't care what you North American bros say, man. Like, half the stuff you have, we would be lucky to even have that, if even a quarter of that. And from what you just told me, it's like you're getting Pokemon cards in Happy Meals. I don't remember that at all. So I'm thinking, man, what the hell, man? You were lucky. You get Pokemon cards in your Happy Meals. You
can get, like I said, you get Pokemon cards. You have little Pokemon figurines and that kind of stuff, like Eevees or like Pikachu or that kind of stuff. And it'd be actual toys. So like I know my favorite one is the Pikachu, where you crank on its tail. And there's a little kind of a little dynamo light inside, so it makes it look like he's producing electricity.
I think Health and Safety Man probably had a field day with that one for us. That's probably why we didn't get any of this stuff, because we tend to be...
well, maybe, I don't know, who knows. But so you get this thing for that. You get all the Hello Kitty stuff that usually is really popular in Hong Kong and that kind of stuff. A lot of Disney stuff, usually a lot of stuff that gets released for movies and that kind of stuff. So when the first Transformers movie comes out, they usually push a lot of that kind of stuff at McDonald's through Happy Meals. I remember the first Spider-Man when that came out. They pushed that. I think a lot of it is Disney and the big movie studios, using that as pre-advertising for a lot of their movies. I guess when the people who do releasing this anime kind of saw this, they go, hey, we want to get into that promotional bandwagon, and they said whoever took care of Pokemon got it right and got onto that bandwagon properly, where the guys who did Dragon Ball, just dropped the ball on it. I think later on, the people who did Sailor Moon, the people who did Inuyasha, they realized that the Pokemon thing works. Let's try to duplicate that same sort of marketing strategy.
What do you think then made Dragon Ball so special then in that case? Because if it didn't have any of this marketing pull that it could have with, say, something like Pokemon, or even Yu-Gi-Oh! Like years later with, say, trading cards and stuff like that, what do you think made Dragon Ball so special then? I
thought about that question. And I think the core of it is that it hit the right type of market. Like he knew his market very well. And because of that, he was able to tap into what the people were looking for really well. Kind of hard to understand what I'm sort of referring to without me kind of getting into a little bit of background. And it's a little bit of a loaded question, so I'm going to kind of go backwards and kind of answer that for you. I'm going to frame it with a little bit more background to help you answer that question. So you got to think of the time period that we're in. So we're talking, the early 80s, that kind of era, right? Throughout the 80s when he was creating Dragon Ball and that kind of stuff. He was a big fan of a lot of the popular media that was out there. Okay, he quoted that one of his biggest influences was Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan. Just like probably you and me, right? We grew up in that era. I remember watching a lot of Jackie Chan movies in Cantonese. I had, as I said, of all the Bruce Lee movies at that time. He was also very tuned to the fact that a lot of us were really getting into this new wave of science fiction shows, and I'm referring to all the things like the Star Treks, the Star Wars, Aliens, the Terminator. These are things that he also was partially interested in. There's references to these things in Dr. Slump. So he knew about these things and he knew to plug them in. So he was very, very well connected to his audience and what they were already being fed in the popular media. So when something like Dragon Ball came to his vision, he wanted to make sure that had the same sort of formula and the same sort of things in it that we were expecting in such shows, martial arts action, a hero fighting off aliens and that kind of thing, truly strong alien and protagonist action going on, right? Keep the suspense going, hero characters, right? Type of thing, right? So I think when it came out, it grabbed a large market appeal. The younger people, because of the funny adventures of Goku and that kind of stuff when he was younger, to the more fighting action, kind of the martial arts and that kind of stuff. So that kind of brought that in. And of course, when the aliens came in, it seemed to bring all that together, right? Which is something that a lot of the people at that time was really focused on, okay? So when I started this train of thought, I went, okay, well, what I need to do is I need to go and look at what everyone else was doing and see how he excelled above everyone else, and how Dragon Ball was the thing that came and rised above everything in the 80s, okay? On my channel, I went through every single year of 1980, picking out all the very most significant titles, and I've created a top 30 list of titles for OVAs, movies, and TV shows, and to find out, what was the best that you can take out of the 80s, okay? And I went through all those different artists and things and found out what everyone did and who he was going against. So I'll start with Yasuhiko Kazu. He's the guy who does all the things like Giant Gorg, Venus Wars, Crusher Joe, Arion. He worked on Zeta Gundam, Raideen, and Gundam, okay? It would be something that he doesn't do a lot of long works, okay? Because Dragon Ball is a very very long, drawn out series with many different characters and that kind of stuff. But he's got a lot of high quality movie works and that kind of stuff, okay? So I think he got that sort of cornered there. The other big names in the longer universe field is Leiji Matsumoto. He's the guy who did Captain Harlock, Space Cruiser Yamato, Vanguard Ace, Queen Millennia, everything from the Galaxy Express 999 series, okay? Now, in terms of if you want to talk about a person who builds his universe, I think he's done a better job creating that entire spectrum, right? Because how Captain Harlock, Cosmo Police, and all that other stuff, Galaxy Express 999, Queen Millennia, that's all one universe, right? And how he's managed to build it out and flesh it out as well as he's done. Definitely, something that was his rival. But the only trick is, again, that's all one sort of space modern sort of universe, right? It may not appeal to everyone, right? Another artist that that one would always pick out for the 80s is Haruhiko Mikimoto, the guy who does Gunbusters, Macross, Orgus, Gundam 080, Megazone 23. Okay, I'd say the quality of his artwork is really very, very nice. And again, nothing really long, a lot of different topics and different sort of environments, but definitely someone that was really popular out of the 80s. High appeal to the anime fans, right? But maybe not so much to the common people market, right? His largest competition in terms of manga during the 80s would have been Rumiko Takahashi, the person who does Ranma Half, Urusei Yatsura, or the entire Rumiko theaters thing. He'll come up with Inuyasha, okay? Maison Akaku, of course. I would argue she'd made probably more longer series than Toriyama did, but all her stuff at that time were romance-based. So at that time, it was Maison Akaku, it's Urusei Yatsura, right? It's always the guy chasing the girl, right? Ranma 1/2, same thing, right? Just adding all the wackiness to it, right? For that matter, Inuyasha, same thing, right? Right? It's literally the same type of story, but it's all in the same genre, okay? So even though she probably has a bigger manga selection, like more titles to her name for that time period, they're all still focused in the same category type, the same genre type, which is usually a high school love romance type of show. Another character that I came to mind is Kiyomiya. So he's the guy who does your Slant Mobius, Gunhead, Sonic Soldier Borgman, Detonator Organ, Compiler, Dark Angel. Again, I find him at this time still very young and very upcoming, because his biggest hits didn't come until much later in the 90s when he came out with Nadeshiko and Steam Detectives and Corrector Yui. Those all came later. So so that's I would refer to him as more of one of those disciples, if you will. Now, the closest competition that I would say that Toriyama had that has the same kind of profile as he has is Hasuka Hojo. He's the guy who brings you City Hunter, Cat's Eye, and Angel Heart. Because theoretically, that's a lot of manga, but it's all the same characters. It's all the same timeline, like or the character line, right? Just like how Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball DT, right? All that is all kind of one sort of long, continuous character line using the same sort of thing, right? Because of it, of the appeal, right? The appeal for 300 and that kind of stuff is, tends to be an older audience, right? A lot of the sexual jokes and that kind of stuff and pandering is obviously meant for an older audience, right? So that's why I think, something like Dragon Ball appealed to a younger audience and captured them when they're young. I'll just make just a few more references just to make the note that I did at least think about them. Osamu Tezuka, okay, so the guy who does Astro Boy, Kimba, Arabian Nights, Phoenix 2772, and Unico. A lot of people call him the grandfather of anime, right? Because of the stuff he does with Astro Boy, his biggest thing. However, the reason why I won't consider him is because all of his various works like Astro Boy and Kimba happened before the 80s started. And under that same category, I'll throw in Monkey Punch, the guy who does Lupin III. Because there's a lot of Lupin III stuff, right? There's 3 different series for Lupin III. There's tons and tons of movies for Lupin III, right? But again, the core of all the TV stuff occurred before the 80s. That's why I won't refer to that one. And the last one I'll do, also in the same category, is Go Nagai. The guy who brings you Cutie Honey, Devilman, Violence Jack, Mazinger Z, Grandizer, Ghetto Robo. So again, a lot of these giant robot shows and that kind of stuff and whatnot. But again, happened before the 80s started. And the reason why I make that important distinction is that the only way we got a lot of this anime is we had to have it on a physical piece of media for us to consume it. Because, the companies weren't releasing things like video cassettes and laser discs and that kind of stuff at this time because they didn't quite exist yet, right? Because that didn't sort of happen until like 85, right? So if it happens in the 70s and no one had a VCR around to record it, no one could see it.
Oh yes, right? Yes, the practicality, yes, quite literally.
Yes, it's just so therefore, yeah, you might have released all this, great, Astro Boy episodes and that kind of stuff, but if nobody kind of licenses it and does anything with it, we won't see it, and that's why we got such things like Harmony Gold and whatnot would release just a smattering of episodes, and they released it in such a way that when they put it on Saturday morning cartoons, it got mixed in with all the regular cartoons, right? And so it didn't seem like anything. It didn't seem like anything contiguous, right? Because it's all scrambled with the Spider-Man and his amazing friends and Scooby Doo and Gem and whatever else they had on Saturday morning, right? So for that reason, that's why it never, any of those titles from the 70s doesn't have any great Western appeal. This is because it was just too hard to get that stuff to consume. And even if you wanted to consume it, it was impossible to get them because no one released, Laserdisc box sets and that kind of stuff at that time until late 80s into the 90s. And by that time, I said Dragon Ball is already out and all this other anime came out for us to consume. So we just kind of forgot all about the stuff that came out in the 80s, the early 80s / 70s.
Essentially the licensing, as you just mentioned last time.
Well, licensing, as I said, just the availability of the thing. Because again, no one had copies of these things unless they had, got a rental copy or they decide, hey, let's make a Laserdisc box set for Mazinger Z or something like that or whatever, right?
Yeah. Then
you had it, right? But sort of one of those type of things. Well, should I get something that old or should I'm going to buy something brand new? And a lot of people kind of, especially in the fansubbing market at that time, we were always on the cusp of edge of getting all the new stuff, not really worrying about all the old stuff. And so that's why I think something like Dragon Ball fit exactly in the right spot in our history to basically, it was one of those things that captured not only the young market, the elementary school kids and that kind of stuff, the teenage kids in the high schools and that kind of stuff. It had just the right amount of action and fighting and actually plot to stimulate the minds of the college and university kids, people that are that are getting into anime and that kind of stuff. It brought all those people together, and with that, because of how long it is, it brought those people through that time period, right? So if you were an elementary school kid and you got interested in Dragon Ball, because the series went on for literally hundreds of episodes, it brought you through high school. It brought you through into college. You still being a fan, you still consuming all that during all that time. I mean, especially when when we got it here in '95, I mean, even you gotta admit, time has passed by and all that kind of stuff. But I would still get people, kids, quickly dropping by my store after school, grabbing things, or grabbing a bunch of videos or whatever, or returning videos, because they had to run home in time to catch their episodes of Dragon Ball or Inuyasha or whatever it happens to be that they were watching, because that was when they were airing it, right after school. So they would the bell would ring at 3 o'clock. They'd have an hour to get home before 4 o'clock, because that's when something like Dragon Ball and Gundam Wing or Sailor Moon or whatever would start, right? And so they had to make sure they were home at that time to catch the next episode. And that's what happens. You capture the kids at the right time. And because it's such a long series, not only you continue to capture their imagination and their interest, you carry them from elementary school to high school through to college. You bring them through hundreds of episodes to bring them through this story. And at the time, they're still consuming. They're still, getting all interested in the stuff. They want, they want the games. They want the, pencil cases. They want backpacks. They want all this stuff, right? That's what ends up happening. And we could see this also happening with things like Naruto, One Piece. Very long series. You got the kids interested when they were young, and they continued to watch it through their grade progressions, and as they go through school, and they continue to consume it. And there's hundreds of episodes for them to consume.
So essentially, then, you've made such a good point about it, and you've made me realize now, essentially, Dragon Ball Z in itself was literally the Naruto of its time.
Yes. It managed to address the correct market demographic for the time it came out. Because if you look at everything else that was coming out at that time, is either giant robot shows or romance shows like Orange Road, Maison Akaku, giant robot shows like Gundam, the Dragonar, the typical, oh no, the Earth is getting attacked. The only way we can fight back is 3 guys in the ninja suits, or with a giant robot, or there's this high-tech Japanese company, whatever, secret military thing that's built this giant robot to fight back the aliens or whatever. They made so many of those kind of movies and TV shows at that time. Here we have something that is different enough. It combines enough of all those different things like sci-fi and martial arts and that kind of stuff, but puts it together in a package that's more palatable for everyone, right? So the kids don't have to deal with the Zeons are fighting the Aeug, and they're trying to drop an asteroid on the Earth and all of their stuff or whatever. And the kids don't have to deal with this guy is chasing after this girl for 100 episodes before you finally get her or something like that, right? They're not dealing with that kind of a show, right? Something that's very simple, that can be understood at multiple different levels. And I think this timing was just right.
You've literally seen anime evolve over the years compared to me. I was far too young of an age to remember any of this stuff or even experience it. I don't think I was even alive in some of these cases. So when did you actually first hear of Dragon Ball? I'm kind of curious when you would have, because for me, Dragon Ball was literally one of those things where when I could start remembering, I just knew Goku was a thing and I knew Dragon Ball was a thing. I was excited for some reason, as if I was watching something again I'd already seen, even though consciously when my memory started to kick in, I went, hang on, I don't think I've seen this before. And as I think back to those sort of times. So when did you actually first hear of Dragon Ball, or first actually discover this as a thing?
Dragon Ball wasn't the first anime I've seen. I've already seen things like Macross. I think I've seen the Chinese version of Mospeada first.
Oh my god.
And
yes.
and the Chinese version of Orgus first, right? In terms of anime, before I saw Dragon Ball. But as I answered earlier, the first time I've actually saw Dragon Ball was on those random VHS tapes I got from the video store. And at the time, I didn't know what it was. I just thought, okay, this is some kid with a tail, okay, doing stuff, okay, whatever. I didn't really even like the artwork, because in terms of, if you compare it to like a Gundam or even things like Orange Road, I didn't think the characters looked that human-like, as it were.
Yeah.
So as I'm trying to figure out what everything is, I have to get these Japanese magazines. So I at the time, I subscribed to 3 different Japanese magazines: Animedia, Anime V, and New Type. Each one correspondingly and focused on the 3 different main medias: TV, OVAs, and just popular movies and media, right? And Dragon Ball keeps appearing. Okay. Now, at the time, it didn't seem like it was very, the biggest or popular thing, right? Like, so a lot of these magazines, they'll do things like polls, right? Who are your favorite characters? What are your favorite shows, right? And they'd have the top 10, right? Even in 1980, 1987, 88, 2 years of Dragon Ball has come out, right? Dragon Ball never really appeared high in the rankings.
Did it not?
No.
Really? Oh,
I mean,
wow.
it was there, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in the top 10, okay.
Yeah.
But top male characters, okay, were going to be things like Yo from City Hunter, Saint Seiya, Char.
Oh, yes.
Probably
Gundam,
ranked higher, okay.
Yes.
Just because as a character, right? I guess a lot of people, feel that they can see more sides of him, more emotionally, more character, right? Like more different character traits to him, right? So when you're looking at, let's say, the top 10 female characters for this sort of like time period, people would put like Madoka from Orange Road, Kyoko from Maison Akaku, right? Things like that would always appear. And like, if something like Bulma or that kind of stuff would be way down in like, 10 or, 15 or maybe down to 20, right? So in terms of popularity, obviously people knew what it was, but there was a lot of other animes that people were interested in Japan, okay? Because if you compare, that kind of a show in Japan, it has, definitely some appeal because, you got to think what they're selling it for and whatnot, because the big marketing push by places like Sunrise, for example, would be in things like model kits and action figures and that kind of stuff, right? So, anything that sold a lot of that gets a lot of push, gets a lot of advertising dollars, right? But something like Dragon Ball, it never really got that. And so for that reason, if you even look at the magazines in general, you will not see Dragon Ball on any cover of New Type or on any cover of Anime V. And a magazine dealing with TV shows, I can't even think of an Animedia magazine that has Dragon Ball on the front cover.
That's crazy. Absolutely crazy to think about. Wow. I thought Dragon Ball was like more or less like maybe not an instant hit, but was certainly definitely like a major hit back then, like, in those days. But from what you're describing, it sounds like the big push really only came from when it became Dragon Ball Z rather than just Dragon Ball.
Even when it was Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball GT, none of the magazines, sort of randomly up to like the year 2000, I cannot think of a single cover for New Type or Anime V. Animedia might have had one, but I really don't even think it even had one. Now, I know it's popular because definitely they got some really big names, at least musically, to perform all the opening and ending theme songs. And, and they were very famous artists to do that kind of thing. And so obviously it had to be popular enough for people to do that with, right? But I'd argue that even with that kind of thing, there are other animes that the general Japanese population would associate and know more than the opening theme songs of any of the Dragon Balls. And the reason I sort of know that, or kind of can come to that conclusion, is whenever I watch Japanese musical programming, and whenever they talk about anime and that kind of stuff, most people can pick out Kamen Rider, Mazinger Z, Sailor Moon, Yamato, those are things that people would associate with anime. I mean, sure, I know that there's a heavy metal band in Japan called Anime Metal. They sing anime songs at heavy metal speed. And obviously they pick songs that most people would know what they are. And yeah, Dragon Ball isn't one of them.
Really?
Yeah. They'll do Gundam, they'll do Star Blazers, they'll do Sailor Moon. They'll do a lot of unknown things like Kamen Rider, Godzilla, Mothra, things like that. Those are, shall we say, a different level of popularity in Japan. But when you get into something like Dragon Ball, that's sort of, okay, you take a person like Shizuka Kudo, who does the opening theme song for Dragon Ball GT, okay, she does Blue Velvet. Nothing, right? She doesn't win any awards for it. It's not even a top, it's not, I don't think it even went to like a top 20 song in Japan. And same thing with Field of View, who does the Dan Dan song. Popular band, but it doesn't do anything for their career, or no one really knows what that is. It's not even one of their biggest hits either. But you take someone like TM Network, who does the Beyond the Time, the ending theme song for Gundam Charge Counterattack. That song ranks right up, right near the top of the best songs of 1988. Everyone sort of knows what that particular song is in terms of their career. People can identify more Yumi Hamazaki songs, for example, her song that she does in Inuyasha. She won Artist of the Year for that song. Right? So those things in terms of popular Japanese culture has more height, has more notoriety than anything that the Dragon Ball franchise has created.
I mean, all of this is really shocking to me in that sense. I thought Dragon Ball was like absolute peak in that sense in terms of the popularity, I guess. But from what you're describing,
worldwide, I think worldwide, that was probably the big surprise. How that franchise has taken the world quite by surprise. I'd agree. To us Asians, that's probably not as surprising because, as I said, we're on the cusp of these type of things, right? So. So we may react a little more differently because I think it has to do with access, right? We've seen better, we've experienced other shows and that kind of stuff, which might have better artwork, better character development, that kind of stuff. So we can differentiate a little more and choose from a larger pool. So that's why we can be a little more selective and be a little more grounded in what animes that we pick.
I guess the way you could probably describe it then is it's probably like Cowboy Bebop then in that sense. Like Bebop was not popular in Japan, but it was an absolute mega hit for the rest of the world, especially like say in America and stuff like that. So I guess from what you're describing, that's kind of what Dragon Ball ended up being. If that's the case then, in your opinion, how important and influential was Dragon Ball then?
Well, Dragon Ball is extremely important. Well, I mean, obviously, you have to look at the numbers, right? Like, Dragon Ball is the number one selling manga worldwide. And so obviously the popularity of the series, just because of how long it is, but also just the fact that it reaches a very, very large demographic that people are able to be interested in. So in that respect, that's very important. The other thing that Dragon Ball did that was really important, it was the first big show to show Western markets and especially North America that long shows like a Dragon Ball will work for TV syndication. Because before this, we didn't have anything this long. We had to do things like what Harmony Gold did, where they had to kind of go and take Macross and Southern Cross and Mospeada and kind of make a big mess of them and put them together so that they can come up with more than 85 episodes in order to make a long enough series for syndication. And so this is the first time where we actually had something that was already going to be over 85 episodes, and it's all one contiguous story. All they had to do was just basically translate it and get it dubbed and throw it out, and it's ready to go. So the production wasn't to shoot it, it was just to basically do the translation and to do the audio dubbing for it, right? So the post-production, right? And then we just got to get that out, put it out on TV, and then we're ready to go. The fact that it worked, signaled that, hey, we can do this for other stuff. And then after that, that's when the whole landscape opened up for things like Sailor Moon, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Inuyasha, okay? Gundam Wings / Seed, right? They all realized, hey, here's a huge database of stuff that's coming out from Japan. All we have to do is we don't have to shoot new scenes or anything like that. All we have to do is we just have to take it to a studio, get some dubbing guys to dub it over and do the post-production and then put it out, right? So the production costs are low. The licensing cost might be high, but at least the production cost is low, and we can get a large number of episodes, and this could help out with the cost per dollar ratio of things. And this proves to them that this model actually will work. And so that's how we got this huge boom of stuff in the late 90s and through the early 2000s.
So moving on to some other Toriyama things then. When it comes to the North American scene, if Dragon Ball was essentially, say, a massive hit in North America and elsewhere in the world, what else was really popular then when back in the day for you that you noticed when it came to things that Toriyama had a hand in, whether it be like, say, anime or anything else that he did in any sense of the word?
being on the Pacific Rim, our accessibility to anime and Japanese things really helped us know and learn a lot more about and have access to a lot more of his works, okay? First thing that he did that was really big was Dr. Slump. Absolutely no interest in it on the North American side, okay? However, we got a lot of that stuff through Hong Kong / Taiwan and whatnot. See, I remember going down to Chinatown and seeing, various different characters and that kind of stuff and whatnot that, for Dr. Slump. I didn't really know what it was. I didn't really care about the series, but the stuff was there. And obviously the more Asian, the Asian kids who grew up on that kind of stuff or had maybe watched some of the stuff on VCDs or something, they knew what it was, and that's who they sold that stuff to, right? There was this sort of a cultural thing that we saw that a certain a segment of the market knew the stuff and was watching the stuff and was very comfortable because it was kind of, shall we say, part of their culture or in their culture, right? And yet they're living in a much broader culture which doesn't know what that is, which is kind of unique. It's like you're a little bit of a slice of Hong Kong in Vancouver, which you can live like Hong Kong. You can watch all the programming, you get all the cool toys and that kind of stuff, and the anime and that kind of stuff that they get in from Japan. But here you are living in the city of Vancouver, which knows nothing of this stuff, all right? Doesn't know what anime is, doesn't know what Dr. Slump is, doesn't know what Dragonball is, right? And they're seeing this whole other culture unfold in front of them. And a lot of people will just walk away and say, I don't, it's stuff I don't understand. I don't want to deal with it. I'm going to, who cares? I'm just going to walk away and go back to watching Scooby-Doo or whatever, right? But for those who were interested, who wanted to know what this is or who knew what this is their sort of gateway, their pathway, their portal into this other culture, which then, eventually links back into Japan, right? So that's my first taste of how I started learning about Dr. Slump. And then again, later on, it helped me. And basically, now that I've got used to, shall I say, this portal, if you will, that's how I get all my other stuff, my Dragon Balls and that kind of stuff. The other big thing that Toriyama does, his other really big franchise was Dragon Quest. That, in its time, was probably one of the biggest RPG video games of its time period. Sure, it wasn't in English or anything at that time, right? Because even when the Super Nintendo came out, they didn't port Dragon Quest over until much, much later. But the kids who knew what they were doing, I remember even when I had it in my store, people still wanted to play the game because what they'd do is they'd draw out the menu because the menu is very simple and the spells and that kind of stuff are relatively easy. They would have a little cheat sheet, a little paper cheat sheet with them, and they'd write down the order of the commands. So it'd be like fight, parry, retreat. They'd have the writings of the spells. So if it looks kind of like this, then it's Mateo. If it's like this, it's something else like that, right? And so they know, and they start memorizing the characters. So if they need to use the fireball spell, you have to look for this kind of slightly longer phrase that ends in these two little slashes or something, right? And that's the key for a fireball spell. I had a couple kids that came in all the time to play Dragon Quest just for that reason, right? When the anime for Dragon Quest came out, nobody here in North America cared or knew what that was. Obviously, I saw from the magazines, it was the same character designer as Dragon Ball. But again, nobody over here bothered getting video cassettes of it or distributing things of that. That was pretty much an Asian thing, and it remains, like Dr. Slump, an Asian thing. The biggest change or the biggest crossover where everything sort of pinnacly came together was Chrono Trigger. To put a timeline on it, it's 1995. We're still using the Super Nintendo. Dragon Ball is just about to come out on TV, or maybe has come out just a few episodes or whatever. What has happened is that the big minds, the guys over at Sony, call them the Dream Team, okay? They got Hironobu Sakaguchi. He's your creator for Final Fantasy. Yuji Horii, which is the creator of Dragon Quest. So you got the two biggest names in RPGs at this time together on the same team. And then, of course, you've got Akira Toriyama as the artist, the character designer on the team. And here they are. They're going to put together this game, which they made called Chrono Trigger. you could probably ask a lot of the people who played things on the Super Nintendo. That is probably one of the key cornerstone games for a Super Nintendo system. Sure, you'll have your Final Fantasy 3 and your Dragon Quest 6. Those are games that came out at the same sort of time. But I know a lot of people who love playing Chrono Trigger all the way through to get all the various different characters. And if you even look on things like eBay and whatnot, Chrono Trigger cartridges are worth a lot of money, hundreds of dollars. When you think of some of the better games that came out on the Super Nintendo, yeah, a lot of people will mention Chrono Trigger. Very, very good game.
What would you say then is his influence on games then beyond just character design? Would you say there's anything more to that than just character design? Because all I know him for is character design when it comes to video games. I'm kind of wondering if there's something you see beyond that when it comes to his influence on games.
No, what I think he does really well, he has a way of making popular and lovable characters. And I don't mean just like, your Gokus and your Vegetas and all that kind of stuff, right? But when you talk about something like Dr. Slump, the female character Arle was really, really popular. She even shows up in a Dragon Ball episode, right? But it's just the fact that people are able to idolize and associate the character out of the actual show itself, right? It says something about creating characters that people can either relate to or people that can attach themselves to in some sort of way, and he's managed to do that with many of his shows, right? So with Dr. Slump, it would be like Arle. I know a lot of people idolize Goku, Vegeta, Trunks. In Dragon Quest, arguably the most popular character out of Dragon Quest is the slime.
Oh yes, that is very true. Yes,
right. And a lot of people, as I said, kind of got their inspiration to use that in other games too. Because you think of something like Puyo Puyo, right? It's a slime with two eyes, right?
I will never see that in the same way ever again now that you've mentioned that.
So I mean, I think that's one thing that he definitely did really well is it's just making characters that people loved beyond the actual show itself.
What would you say then is the unique thing about Toriyama's character design in that sense of making them like lovable, I guess, or things that people like? I say this because when I think of, say, something like Dr. Slump, I think of that as like almost the most purest representation of how wacky Toriyama's world really is when it comes to how he illustrates things. And then when I think of some of the more quirky, sort of very sort of like the moment you see it, it's Toriyama sort of illustrations or art style. I think of, say, landscapes from Dragon Ball, or machinery that he draws or has designed, or even just like things that are not human. It's got a very sort of Toriyama-esque sort of thing. What do you think is or dare I say, the secret sauce behind that? What do you think is the thing that makes it Toriyama?
I think the reason why he's able to make these characters and make them appeal to us a certain way is that he had a really good grasp of what Western culture, popular media was doing at that time. I said earlier, when looking at some of the things that he uses as inspirational references, right? A lot of his stuff came from those Chinese martial arts movies. And at that time, we were really into that. Bruce Lee was a really big character. Jackie Chan, at the time before he made all those US made movies, right? He was really that kind of a funny, wacky type of character, right? Strong hero, and all the references that he did for science fiction. He knew what the nerdy types and the shall we say, the Trekkies and the Star Wars guys and all that stuff. They knew what they fell in love with when they watched those shows. And I think all he did is he just took characteristics and things that we related to in the same way and applied that to characters and situations and whatnot in the same way. And I think he did the best job of doing that because he was able to look outside of Japan to see what the West was making in that respect. And if you compare against all the other sort of artists that you had, for example, Rumiko Takahashi, Haruka Hojo for City Hunter and that kind of stuff, they weren't really doing that. She stuck with her essentially trope of guy chasing girl. Different situations, different things happen. You could probably grab a lot of this stuff out of afternoon soap operas, like General Hospital and whatever at that time to get you your stories and your, him backstabbing her and all this other stuff and triangles and all this stuff going on, right? it was nothing new, but it's not something that the general populace cares about, right? Stay-at-home moms that that watch soap operas all afternoon, sure, okay, but but yeah, the rest of the population doesn't really get into that, right? Likewise with City Hunter, right? A lot of the stories and the situations you can get from your typical slapstick detective cop vigilante type shows, right? Didn't matter if it was like the Equalizer, the A-Team, Knight Rider, Magnum PI, whatever, right? Kojak, whatever, right? They're all things that you could probably, grab and use and manipulate and things like that. But not everyone likes those type of shows. So I think he managed to strike a balance between what's popular that was happening in the West and adapting an anime style to that widely appealed to everybody. I think one of the ways I sort of kind of maybe bring a little light to it is kind of like what Disney does. Not modern Disney, because Disney can't do anything.
We don't talk about modern Disney here. We don't go there.
Yeah. They can't make a good movie to save their lives. But back in the day, the Disney movies and that kind of stuff were popular because they appealed to everybody. Young kids, older kids, male or female, doesn't matter. It had relatable topics and things that occur that everyone could associate with or feel or have empathy for. They just had a way to write that into different stories that basically was, again, vastly popular with the general population. And I think what he's managed to do is he's kind of done that kind of thing where he's taken the landscape, okay, the fandom, the popularity of science fiction and that kind of stuff, martial arts, and stitched that together to make something that appealed to everybody, not just the three Gs, the guns, girls, and gore, which basically ruled the later half of the 80s and all throughout the 90s.
We've been talking about Toriyama throughout this episode here and there. And obviously, as time goes on, people still talk about him. And especially with his passing being still quite recent as of time of recording, it's still going to be quite a hot topic. One of the things I've kind of struggled with this whole thing is trying to understand how important Toriyama's work really is. And I say that as I sort of mentioned, Toriyama was just a thing in my household. It's like Goku's like, I know, the uncle in my family that I just know of, but everyone thinks he's super cool, but I just think he's just my uncle, whatever. I don't think much of him in that sense. Even though at some point I do agree that, I did think he was super cool, but I guess I normalized to that in that sense. I kind of got used to that. My question is then to you, how important and influential do you think Toriyama really was? Like, how would you explain to someone who, let's say, for example, a complete normie, has no idea who Toriyama is, has no idea about Dragon Ball or anything to do with anime at all? How would you explain how important this man is in history?
I would say that he would be the first and probably the biggest name, of the Japanese manga artists and and TV series IPs to show the North American West market that this anime thing is bigger than just a localization or just a thing that Japanese people watch. He showed the world that the things that are coming out of Japan and the all this wealth of anime and storytelling is a untapped entertainment resource waiting to be uncovered. And I think he was sort of one of the biggest name, had the best example of this, shall I say, the ambassador to the rest of the world, this thing called Dragon Ball that everyone sort of consumed, and for a lot of people, was the first real anime that they saw. And that really holds true for a lot of the anime fans and has a really profound sort of influence on them because they relate to all the cool things that they did, some of the experiences that they had when Dragon Ball came out in their lives. I think because he's, like Sarah said, the first person to show us that this can be done, he paved the way for all the other things that came to follow. They realized that, hey, this anime thing is a big thing. We should get more of it out there. So, of course, things like Toonami and whatnot, we got onto the bandwagon and released things like Sailor Moon and Pokemon, your Yu-Gi-Ohs, your Gundam Wing, Gundam Seeds, and that kind of stuff. Inuyasha, okay, they all realize that, hey, this is stuff we can put on TV. This is stuff we need to get out to the market. And once that floodgate got opened, that's what he managed to basically, start that chain reaction that put that thought into all the people who are doing the funding and all the marketing to realize that yes, this anime is not just a niche thing like Star Trek or Star Wars or that kind of stuff. It's actually something that's bigger than that, and that it, in itself can be called its own whole genre. And I think Toriyama is best suited as the first ambassador for Japan to show us that this is possible.
A real cultural ambassador, quite literally. In that case, what do you think is the legacy of Akira Toriyama? Like, what would you say is the message that he stood for, the things that he believed in, and perhaps wanted to pass on to us in his works?
Well, I look at a lot of his stuff and the stories that he tells, and it's always about following dreams, having hope, always following and pursuing, never sort of giving up. If you follow characters like Goku, and you just kind of think of how he, against all the odds and against all the things that are going against them, however many times he gets slammed down, he always fought through it and persevered, right? And you can kind of think of all the things that he's worked on, how many times that he's tried to push on and make new projects and that kind of stuff. But he still went on and produced more mangas, did a whole bunch of little shorts and that kind of stuff, and continued to do things. And so I think his message is, his message that he'd like to pass on would be things like, you can only really depend on yourself to do the things that you've always wanted to dream and always wanted to do. If you have things on a checklist and you're procrastinating, you will never get those done unless you push yourself through and push to get those things done. If you have a dream that you want to do something or be something, you have to pursue that dream to get it achieved. No one's going to give it to you. You're not entitled to have any of that. It's all done through hard work, and it's work that you have to do yourself. Don't expect someone else to do it for you. You need to push through it and find a way to do it. And I think that's one of the things that I think, if you follow a lot of his characters, I think that's sort of the message that he would like us to get out of his shows. And if you think about what his influences were and his favorite characters he idolizes, that's exactly what he is trying to portray and also pass on to us. I mean, if you think about how Bruce Lee does all his movies, and Jackie Chan and some of the struggles he has in his movies and whatnot, that's sort of the same thing that he wanted us to, and he's portrayed in his characters. So I think the message is the same.
And any thoughts as an old school anime fan?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the passing of Toriyama, a lot of people, especially in the media and that kind of stuff, especially in like YouTube and that kind of stuff, are basically doing the same thing you're doing. You're going to Google, you're going to Wikipedia, and you're basically looking up his stuff and basically, reading up on what has he done, what is his works and that kind of stuff. And reading the text as a younger person may fail to see what a lot of the significance of these things are, because they'll just say, oh, he's known for Dr. Slump, and that's it. But you have to realize that Dragon Ball, and especially when the popularity of this thing came out, it was back in 1989. If you were 10 years old back in 1989, you would have to be at least 45 years old. If you're not of that age, you've never lived when it first came out. Sure, if you're like 95 or whatever, and you're only like 34 years old, okay, you obviously lived and grew up when Dragon Ball was on TV. And that would have like the strongest influence to you, but only from the Western perspective, right? And so that's why, you talking today and doing this interview today, talking to a much older person like myself, we can go over the experiences of when Dragon Ball came out when we were younger, like, when we were going through that childhood phase in that. And I think that adds a lot more perspective to the story of Toriyama that obviously can't be brought from someone much younger than us.
So, William, now that we're coming to a close, where can we find you?
So you can find me. I have a YouTube channel called The History of Fan Anime, YouTube/William Chow. You can also find me on many of the multimedia sources like Twitter, hashtag William Chow, and Instagram at William Chow.
Any final words to end on about this whole thing?
My only word that I have to people out there is that when this kind of occurrence happens, people always make tribute videos and comment about a very important person that has left the anime community. It just goes to realize that the talent that we have, the experience and whatnot that we have is something that we lose. And we're all not getting younger, so it's just an indication to the people, especially to the younger ones out there. People are going to have to step up and replace and find a place for themselves in this world to replace these people, their creativity, their experience, their ideas and that kind of stuff. They are what basically makes anime so vibrant, so different concepts and different ideas, different drawing styles, different techniques. And as I said, it's all up to the younger generation to aspire to fill these shoes of all these greats that are slowly, as time goes on, will be leaving us, okay? And that not only includes creative people, manga artists, and that kind of stuff, but also things like voice actors and whatnot. A lot of time and skill is required to do the multi-talented work that these people have to do in order to get the anime to the quality that we enjoy today. Otherwise, the anime that we get will slip into something that we may not want it to be, or it may turn out to be something that is a subset of how good have we had it.
William Chow, thank you very much for today.
Thank you.